What is up, everybody? Welcome. So I've got a new Commander 16 deck for you. It's not Yidris or Bria. Those are definitely on my short list to do, but I've got a little partner action. So ever since I spoiled partners, I've been really drawn to like that ability because it's really cool. And it was just really a unique deck to build just because using two different commanders, I'll kind of jump into that more. It's almost like you're building two separate decks that like work really well together. But it was a unique building experience, so I've been pretty happy with it. So I felt like my first little adventure into the Commander 16 would be okay with a little Sultai action. So as far as our partner commanders, if you're unfamiliar, they released a new partner mechanic into Commander 16, and basically that allows you to have two separate legendary creatures be your partnered commanders, hence the partner name. So for this deck, I chose Kydele, Chosen of Krufix, and we also chose Reyhan, Last of the Abzan. We're going to start with Reyhan. So whenever Reyhan enters the battlefield, it's going to enter with 3+1 counters on it. Then whenever a creature you control dies or is put into the command zone, if it had one more +1 counters on it, you may move it to another creature. Long story short, if Reyhan dies or if another creature you control with a +1 counter on it dies, you can shift those counters around. So pretty cool little ability. The second partner commander is Kydele. So basically, we're going to add one colorless mana to our mana pool for each card that we've drawn. So the way the deck kind of breaks down, it's a Sultai Matters deck, and at the same time, we have a lot of card draw that's going to benefit us. We don't have like a solid win condition. We're not like cast this spell and we win the game. It's just a lot of low to the ground Sultai value cards and counter cards and drawing. There's a lot of synergy in there. So those are the two partner commanders. The next thing we're going to cover is like the card draw. So basically, when you're building a partner deck, you're building basically a half deck for the one commander and then the other deck for the other commander. So as far as the card draw to benefit Kydele, we're running a lot of just good value spells. We've got Brainstorming in here, so for one blue mana, you can turn that into 3 colorless from Kydele. We're also running Sylvan Library, so those are cards drawn. Even though you're not keeping them in your hand, there's still 2 cards drawn, so that's going to add 2 right there in addition to your draw steps. So that's 3 if you get down Sylvan Library. We're also running Howling Mine in here. I love Howling Mine. Yeah, when I first got into Magic, Howling Mine like went into every little casual deck that I built just because I love card draw. So that's kind of why I built this deck, is I love card draw, I love Sultai, and I love value stuff, and that's kind of all 3 of them in here. So we got Howling Mine in here. We've got Rites of Flourishing. We can play an additional land, and then we draw an additional card. So it just really adds to the Kydele. Adding that colorless mana. Then you have cards like Painful Truth, where it's just kind of replacing itself, so you can cast it, draw 3 cards if you're spending 3 mana, and then you'll have that colorless mana to cast with Kydele. Frantic Search, another thing, we're going to be drawing 2 cards and then we can untap land, so it replaces itself and adds value to that colorless mana. And then Dictate of Krufix, so unlike Howling Mine and Rites of Flourishing, once we get it down, our opponent's going to get the first benefit where they get to draw that card, so they can draw a card and then have some type of removal to get rid of it, and so they'll basically go up a card. With Dictate of Krufix, you can flash it in at the beginning of each player's draw step. That player draws an additional card, so that's kind of a way for us to pop it in at the end of their turn and get that card draw going for us, and then kind of get ahead right there. But yeah, that's the card draw right there. So with the card draw comes generating a lot of mana, hopefully. And so one of the ways to take advantage of that is running stuff like Villainous Wealth in here. So target player exiles the top X cards of his or her library. Then you may cast any non-land cards with a converted X or less from there. So like there was at one point where in one of my matches, we fired a Villainous Wealth off for like 15. So you can definitely generate the mana. We're also running a Manamo in here, so we can untap Kydele and get that extra colorless mana. So Villainous Wealth is definitely, if you can get into a spot to where you can just generate a ton of mana, you can exile their entire library, so that's pretty cool. Also, we have Altered Ego in here. This is kind of more of I'm going to put it over here with the Simic Good stuff. I didn't think it was really more. Oh, let's get this over. There we go. The next thing we have is Hooded Hydra. So it enters the battlefield with X+1 counters on it. Then when it dies, you can create a 1 green snake token for each counter on it. I don't have this recorded. I was kind of playtesting the deck, but I did get into a spot to where we had a Hooded Hydra that was morphed, and then our opponent cast Damnation. So we had a bunch of counters on the battlefield. So we unmorphed the Hooded Hydra, bioshift I think 15 counters onto Hooded Hydra, and made 15 1/1 snakes. So it's a really cool card, especially if bioshift or if you have a Corpsejack Menace. It's because when it flips, you're going to put when it flips, you're going to put those on there. So simply just flipping it with the Corpsejack Menace turns it into a 10/10, and then you get those snake tokens. Then we're running Genesis Hydra. On Genesis Hydra, whenever you cast it, reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put a non-land permanent with converted cost X or less onto the battlefield. So, like when I originally put this in here, there's a game where I play it where I think it's like Genesis Wave, and I got Genesis Wave stuck in my head, so I like busted Genesis Hydra for 20, thinking we're gonna get all these permanents, and then it's just grab a permanent. So Genesis Hydra grabs a permanent. Make sure you remember that. But it's still a good card for the deck. And then we have Protean Hydra. So it enters the battlefield with X+1 counters on it. Then if damage will be dealt to it, prevent that damage, remove that many, and then put those many on there. Once again, if we have a way where we can move the counters around, we have Forgotten Ancient. We have a couple other ways. We can just get a good source for a counter, and then it has that fog effect. So it's just a good value creature. They're also running Green Sun Zenith. So actually, that's more of just a value spell. Yeah, I forgot it was over there. And then we're also running Blue Sun Zenith. So, once again, with Villainous Wealth, if we can get into spots where we're generating a lot of mana, we can actually make our opponent draw a bunch of cards and make them lose the game. Or, that's Magic Christmas Land, but it's also good in that, let's say we have 3 blue mana and like 3 more colored sources. So we can draw a bunch of cards of Blue Sun Zenith and tap Kydele and then regenerate that mana and recast a bunch of stuff. So it kind of limits you on the colored mana for your turn if you're just casting permanents, but it's still a good value spell to get in there. So we did the card draw, we did the big mana spells. The next creatures are the ones that benefit Reyhan, or at least benefit from having the counters shifted around if something dies. So onto the counter creatures. So we've got Thrumming Bird in here. So it has flying, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, proliferate. It's not the best card, but if you have a whole board of 6 or 7, 8 creatures and they all have counters, you can swing in for 1 and just get all those additional counters. We're also running Sage of Hours in here, so remove all counters from Sage of Hours. Take 5 for each 5 removed. Take an extra turn after this. So this is kind of one of those. We don't really have any target spells, but it's almost like Magic Christmas Land, where we're going to shift. Well, not Magic Christmas Land. We do have a sack outlet here in Carrion Feeder. If it'll shift up, there we go. Carrion Feeder, sacrifice a creature, put a +1 counter on it. So we can get into a spot to where if we have Reyhan out, we can sacrifice a creature and move those counters over to Sage of Hours and start taking extra turns. I'm not a huge extra turn fan in Commander, but if we've gotten to like turn 8, turn 9, turn 10, and we've gotten this board state to where we can put a bunch of counters on there, then it's kind of fair game. But I probably won't go for extra counters just like right off the bat, like turn 3 or for turn 4. Usually once we get to about turn 8 for me, that's when hey, if you're going to do something busted, we've gotten to turn 8, turn 9, and then that's fair game to me. We also have Simic Manipulator, so it has evolved, so we can get +1 counters on it, then remove 1 or more counters from it, and then gain control of target creature with power less than or equal to the number of counters removed this way. So it's a good way to start grabbing creatures, and we're going to gain control of that creature. Even if Simic dies, it doesn't matter, we gain control of it. So pretty fun card. We have Elusive Krasis. So let's say we're in a spot, it can't be blocked, and it has evolved. Let's say we're in a spot to where we need to bioshift a bunch of counters on it to close the game out. It's not going to be like the first way I want to win with this deck, but if we need to close it out, we at least have that unblockable spot right there, and then plus it's going to evolve and get counters on it. Then we have Chasm Skulker. So whenever you draw a card, put a +1 counter on it, so it fits in really well with the draw stuff for Kydele. And then whenever it dies, you can create X/1/1 blue squid creature tokens with Island Walk. So let's say we sacrifice it, move those counters onto something else, because if we have Reyhan out there, we're going to get a bunch of squid tokens, and if our opponent's playing like an island, then we'll have Island Walk. We also have Cold Eye. So Cold Eye has Island Walk, and then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw that many cards. I think during one of my games, I had Cold Eye, and then we had I think it was the Mimic where I was making copies of it. It was swinging in, so that was pretty cool. Next, we have the Snake over here. So whenever you draw a card, put a +1 counter on it. Once again, it just kind of fits into that Chasm Skulker thing, to where we're just going to over time get a nice value creature with each card that we draw, and then the +1 counters are just a bonus. Aetherborn Marauder. This is a pretty solid card. So it has Flying Lifelink. Whenever it enters the battlefield, move any number of +1 counters from other permanents you control onto him. So it's kind of like the Elusive Krasis. Like maybe we need a big finisher, so we can simply cast him, maybe move all the counters over to him, and then throw the Lightning Greaves on it and swing in with haste. So, and plus that lifelink, put a bunch of counters on there with lifelink, you can really bounce back from an aggressive deck. I also have Fathom Mage in here. It has evolved, and then whenever a +1 counter is placed on it, you may draw a card. Once again, if we have Corpse Jack, any type of Forgotten Ancient, or if we're moving counters on it, we can start drawing cards. Then we have Mindless Automaton. It enters the battlefield with 2 +1 counters, remove 2 counters from it, draw a card. So we're hoping to get this down with a Corpse Jack Menace, or once again, just move counters over for Reyhan and start drawing those cards to add mana for Kydele. Then we have Forgotten Ancient, so whenever a player casts a spell and that counts for us, we're going to put a +1 counter on it. And then at the beginning of our upkeep, you can move any number of counters from Forgotten Ancient onto other creatures. So let's say we need to move some, there's a bunch of counters on Forgotten Ancient. We can move them all over to Sage of Hours or Simic Manipulator to kind of get that evolve up and running quicker. They're also running Spike Breeder in here. So it enters the battlefield with 3 counters. For 2 colorless, remove a counter, put a +1 counter on target creature. Then for 2 colorless, remove a +1 counter, create a green Spike creature token. So this is in here just as a little bit of a value, kind of use our mana to create some little 1/1 tokens. We're also running Bloodspore, so it devour 1, and then each creature we control enters the battlefield with X additional counters on it, where X is the number of counters on Bloodspore. So let's say we have some nice creatures out there. We don't want to devour them. Let's say we devour 1 or 2 creatures. We can start putting counters on Bloodspore with, say, like Forgotten Ancient, and then each creature that comes in is going to get that amplifying effect. So you don't really have to like eat your entire board to take advantage of this one. And then we have Corpsejack Menace, man. If 1 or more +1 counters be placed on a creature you control, twice that many get put on there. Solid card. Simply with him out there, bio-shifting counters onto another creature just doubles it. This is kind of like, I wanted an excuse to build a commander deck with Corpsejack Menace and then it be Sultai. So that's kind of why I built this deck, was basically, I had a Sultai counter deck in Return to Ravnica Standard a long time ago with Bounding Krasis and Corpsejack. You know, it was very kitchen magic, but I would take it to Friday Night Magic, and I always loved that. So basically Corpsejack and Elusive Krasis are the reason why I made this deck, because I remembered how fun it was to play with them. But yeah, and then we also have Prime Speaker Zagana, so he's going to enter the battlefield with put +1 counters equal to the greatest power that you control, and then you're going to draw cards equal to her power. So once again, it's a way to just get a little value. You do have to be careful though. If you have a Corpsejack out there and like a 10-10, you're going to be drawing like 20 cards. You're going to be generating a lot of mana, but you don't want to lose the game from a Prime Speaker coming in and you can't, like, you don't have enough cards to draw, which is entirely possible. And then we have the Sages over here. So it's graph 4, and then for 1 colorless, remove 2 counters from among creatures you control, draw a card. Solid card. Unfortunately, I never got to get this out during my games, but it is a really good card. Just for the colorless mana, remove 2 counters from creatures you control. It doesn't really have to be them, and you start drawing card. After the counter creatures, we have counter spells. Where are they? So we are spells that just kind of work well with the counters that we're doing. So we have Retribution of the Ancients. Black, remove X counters from creatures you control. Target creature gets -X, -X. So it's kind of our removal. Take advantage of those counters. We're also running Bioshift. It's a really good way as like a combat trick or to take advantage of some of our card draw creatures. We're also running Nissa. Nissa's really good. We can get a plant token down, and then once we kind of get those plant tokens established, start putting +1 counters on all of our creatures. Or with our ultimate, gain X life, draw X cards, where X is the number of lands that you control, that slots in really well with Kydele. So it's almost like she was made for this deck, the counters and the card draw, because once you get that plant token down in Commander, unless you're playing against a really aggressive deck, it's not that far-fetched to get to her ultimate pretty quick. We have Retreat to Kazandu. So it has landfall whenever a land enters the battlefield, and we're running a ton of ramp in here with Kodoma's Reach, Growth Spasm, Cultivate, Skyshroud Claim. Just a good value card. So whenever a land enters the battlefield, we're either going to gain 2 life or put a +1 counter on target creature. It's just turning our land drops into creatures. Then we have Give and Take. I'm going to make it bigger right here. So for 3 mana green, put 3 counters on target creature. Then for 3 mana blue, remove all +1 counters from target creature you control, draw that many cards. So let's say we have a bunch of counters on Forgotten Ancient, we can just cast the take side of the card and draw that many cards, which will pump Kydele. So those are kind of our counter matter spells. And then we just have a nice little assortment of blue-green good stuff. We've got Altered Ego. It can't be countered. It's going to come in with +1 counters on it, equal to X, and then it'll come in as a copy of another creature. We're also running Tireless Tracker, so to turn our land drops into clue tokens, and then whenever we sacrifice a clue token, we're going to get +1 counter on it. Rite of Replication. It's just, we're running a lot of ramp in here, and it's just, hey, fun card to play with. We're also running the Mimic in here, so Mimic will enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it gains, at the beginning of your upkeep, create a copy of it. So once he's on the battlefield and we copy a creature, we're going to keep getting that creature, and yeah, fun card to play with. We're also running Greater Good, so sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, then discard that. We're going to have to discard those cards, but let's say we sacrifice a 10-10 or 2020. We're going to draw that many cards, and it's an activated ability. So we can sacrifice a creature, draw those cards. That's going to pump Kydele for a bunch. This is where you're kind of getting into Magic Christmas Land with like Greater Good and a really big creature, and firing off a Blue Sun Zenith with a Manamo out there, making your opponent draw their entire deck, or exiling their entire deck with a Villainous Wealth. And Greater Good's a way you can do that just because it's an activated ability. So it is a little Magic Christmas Line doing that, but it is in there. It is entirely possible. Then, since we're running so much card draw, we're running Notion Thief. So, if we have Howling Mine out there, Rites of Flourishing, Dictative Crewfix, we can flash it in and just kind of start taking away that card draw they're generating. Also running Master Biomancer, so each creature you control enters the battlefield with a number of additional +1 counters on it equal to Master Biomancer's power. So basically, each creature we cast is going to enter in with at least 2 counters, and then we can somehow get some counters over to him via Forgotten Ancient or Bioshift, and then that's really going to amplify. If we're getting down a little like Gyre Sage and it comes in as like a 6/7, 8, like a 8/9 or something, like it's pretty good. And then we're also running Seedborn Muse. Untap all permanents you control during each player's untap steps. Just a way to just really capitalize on the mana that we're doing, and we can untap a Mana Vault. And then I think that's it for the deck. The mana base is pretty standard blue-green, 3-color. Manamo is really the only land I would hit on. Other than that, yeah, the lands. You could run some of those colorless lands where you're drawing cards, but yeah, it's pretty solid. Definitely enjoyed the deck. It's a lot of fun. It was really cool building this deck just because there was not a whole lot to go on other than like I wanted to build a deck with Corpsejack Menace, Prime Speaker, and Elusive Krasis. Like that was my standard deck I played during Return to Ravnica for a little bit. So I was just like, how do I make this better? And also, having another excuse to play with Villainous Wealth. That's always fun. So, all right, guys, I've got 3 gameplay videos up there for you. I hope you enjoy them. And if you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. Thanks, guys.